So just imagine you have no boundaries, you're taking all these clients in, half of them you don't even like, you just, you know what I mean? It's just like you're just doing the job that you have assigned yourself to do. And then 2020 hits and bam, you are faced with this reality that any second your life may no longer like exist. And how do you want to live it for the rest of it?
I'm so glad you could make it. Sit down, sit down. Oh, yeah. Oh, the band is gonna be awesome tonight. I dig it. I'm so glad you could make it.
Our APY sessions. I'm your host, Auntie Hair Coach, and I interview everyday people telling real stories about their beauty industry journey. So today's guest is a beauty industry educator, One Shot Hair Awards finalist, and behind the chair stylist specializing in blonding and vivids. Asia has entered the chat. Welcome and thank you for taking my invitation.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's always a privilege to be parts of spaces like this. So thank you.
Yes. So, I was sharing with you that my first time meeting you was actually last year at Danger Jones Unplugged. I also am a Vivid stylist. I love Vivids. And your work was incredible. I loved the way you connected with, like, you didn't approach your education as someone who was speaking like, oh, I'm so much better than at this than you. You know, it just felt very organic and very like I'm just here to share this thing with you, but also approached it as if you might take something away from it too. So I enjoyed that. I wanted to know more about you. I've been following ever since, so I'm so excited to finally get a chance to really chat with you. But before we get started, my guests always like to know who they're dealing with. So if you would just kind of share a bit about who is Asia Hamilton? Where'd you grow up? How'd you grow up? What shaped you into the person you are today?
How long are your podcast episodes? Because
As long as we need them to be.
all right, wow, a lot of that's a lot to try to get to know me.
Mhm.
Okay, so Hamilton, in a summary, is just it's just a human being that has had a lot of interesting experiences over the years. That's just created someone who is very passionate about what they do, but also what they stand for. So, a little backstory. I was a child of a military family, so I grew up in South Korea. That's where my father met my mother. So I was born in South Korea, but soon traveled to a lot of places. So if you ask me where I'm from, a lot of times I'll tell you I have a point of origin. That's why I like to tell people. But I'm a military brat, grew up traveling around a lot, and that gave me a lot of experiences and exposures to a lot of different people. So, that in a sense makes up a lot of who I am. Someone who, because I've been exposed to a lot of different people, have a very open perspective about who people are. Um, before I entered the hair industry, I would have, if you had told me I was going to enter the hair industry, I would have told you that there was no way in hell. Because by the time I had entered the hair industry, I was 20, a little bit of a lost soul. At that point, I was like just this crust punk who was just trying to have a good time, but also knew that it takes money to have a good time. So I should probably think about having a career. I hated high school, so I knew I didn't want to go to college at that time. And the opportunity arose for me to start an apprenticeship. And I had a friend who worked at a salon, and a lot of people encouraged me to try doing hair. I mean, I didn't even shave my armpits and legs. I didn't wear makeup. I did not think about like beauty being a part of who I am. So it was one of those things where, like my mom said, give it a try. If you like it, that's great, and if you don't, you can always move on to something else. And so I tried it, and I've always been pretty artistic. So the more I did it, the more that artistic parts of me, and then the beauty stuff came after.
Yes.
Some shave my legs and my armpits now, So yeah, that's just a little bit of like my backstory as to like what I was, you know, who I am, how I landed in the industry. But it's just so much more to that. It could get a little convoluted. So I'll just give you the quick synopsis.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's funny because I definitely had you pegged as a military kid, as an also military kid.
Okay.
Um, and I didn't go with my dad to Korea. We stayed in the United States, but he was stationed in Korea for a year. What are some places that you've lived? Because I always think that people always ask me, and maybe you can relate to this. People always say, was it weird moving around all the time when you were a kid? And I'm like, it was what I knew. When you're a kid, you just don't know any different. But I think that it does give me some unique insight into just relating to people, because when you're moving all the time, you kind of have to learn how to navigate new spaces, new faces, new places. You know what I mean? Um, can you talk about, like, well, first of all, kind of tell us some places that you grew up, but also maybe talk about whether or not you feel like the military has helped or hindered, or if that's had any effect on how you relate behind the chair.
Right. So I wish I could say that I remembered Korea, but I lived there for like about a year. I was there for about a year before we moved, and we've
Mhm.
to a lot of amazing places. Hawaii, we were in Japan. Um, we were in all different parts of the state. The area that resonates with me the most when I think about it, even though I was really young, was we lived in Thailand. We lived in Chiang Mai, which is up in the mountains, and my memories are so positive. Like it's a warm. What do they consider a warm culture climate? They're very open to people. They're very giving. They like to share their cultures with others, their culture with others. Um, I can walk past a jasmine bush and it brings me back to Thailand, but I can also walk past open sewage and it brings me back to Thailand. So it's just like lots of memories, positive, happy memories that come from there. And it's a beautiful country, and I think people like to travel there, especially Americans, to like to go and visit. I definitely would recommend that people get to know the people of Thailand because they're very warm and loving people. Um, that being said, yes, as a child growing up traveling around a lot, you have to learn how to adapt. And
Mhm.
I think growing up, it always felt like I was never able to make a friend and keep a friend. And when you're a child, that's really hard, right? Like you make a friend, you build this tight connection, and then in anywhere between 2 to 4 years, you have to start all over. And I think when you're a child, that's very hard. But then you learn as an adult. You are very good at being able to be in spaces with new people and can build connections with them. And if anything, I'm very self-reliant because there's a lot of lack of consistency when you are a military brat. The only thing that stays the same is basically you in your direct environment, which is so you learn to kind of rely on yourself for the things that you can't necessarily get when you are somewhere and building a community, right? So your like own sense of self, your own kind of like sense, like a self-esteem, confidence, self-worth, things that are generally kind of cultivated in communities.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay, I want to go back because you did not go to a traditional beauty school. You said that you studied by Apprenticeship.
Yes.
And so could you share say that again?
The school of hard knocks, and you go through an
No
apprentice.
doubt.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because I went to a traditional beauty school, and it is well documented that I was a horrible beauty school student. Um, and I actually wasn't even aware that apprenticeship was an option until I moved to Georgia a few years ago. And it's an option here. And so now I'm taking my daughter through cosmetology by apprenticeship. Um, but share with us like what it's like in an apprenticeship. Obviously, you can't really compare and contrast to beauty school if you didn't
Right.
go. But I often hear that people who graduated apprenticeship are very well prepared for the real world in terms of um, like customer service and the people skills and the technical skills even, but maybe less prepared for state board. Talk about how your apprenticeship experience was like. What was a typical day like, and did you feel prepared for the state board? Did you feel prepared for the real world? How was
Okay.
that?
All right. Let's start by, as successful as I am, I failed the state board the first time. So let me let you know, perseverance is key, right?
Uh-huh.
I feel this. So as far as the real world is concerned, I mean, yes, it definitely has you prepared for what you what what life behind the is going to look like, because it's trial by fire a lot of times, right? I was lucky enough to work in a company where they had a more structured apprenticeship program. So there was a space where you would, like an academy, where you would go and you would learn like your practicals in cutting and coloring. And then you would spend the rest of your time in the salon, like with a mentor, um, learning as you work. So I think because you're learning as you work, um, you at the same time get to troubleshoot some of the things that people who go through hair school don't experience until after they've graduated and gotten their cosmetology licenses and gotten their first job, right? Or the first position on the floor. So it's like you get to kind of make some of those mistakes and learn as you're going before you actually are the professional in the chair taking a client. And I was the personal assistant to the manager, one of the managers of the salon, who was the color specialist. So I was lucky in the sense that I was constantly having my hands in people's hair, getting to learn the nuances of coloring. She was a colorist that had a lots of experience with intercoiffure, if you know what coiffure is. Had a lot of experience working with Wella at the time. Her story is that before Wella brought on the Dove, their color specialists, they were, considering her and another team of hairstylists that work at the company that I'm at to become colorists for Wella. So I started with a really strong color foundation, which I have to say has given me a huge advantage in this industry, because being able to have learned from someone who had so much knowledge definitely gave me an upper hand once I got on the floor. And, I think it also gave me the experience of learning how to work with people that you didn't necessarily want to work with, right? I think every stylist has encountered at some point a client that sits in their chair that is not necessarily one of their people. And
Mhm.
you become someone who is able to. Um, I'm trying to think of the best way of saying this. Kind of table your whatever personal feelings that you have about someone in order to be professional and get the job done. Now, I will say, now that I'm on my own and I'm a stylist, I don't take those clients. I'm happy to recommend you
Yeah.
to someone else that's probably more for you. But when you're going through it, at least I know how to, you know,
Yes.
more nuanced in those situations. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I call it being diplomatic. And
Yeah.
early in my career, I was diplomatic, I think, to the extreme. And post 2020, it was the pandemic for me. When everything shut down and like everybody was like just it was a lot. Or you were
Mhm.
there. It was a lot, right? And
We were all
post 20, yes. And it just coming back into the salon with all of the restrictions and everything, it was just very intense. And people were coming in with their intense emotions, but now I also have intense emotions that I'm still trying to deal with. And so 2020 was the moment for me where I was like, you know what, you can find someone else. I can't do this with you today,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah, yeah. So I've been in the industry for 20 plus years, and up until 2020, up until the pandemic, I was one kind of hairstylist, right? So this newer generation of hairstylists doesn't know what it's like to have to be the person who does everything, takes whatever sits in their chair, and smiles and does it and grins along, whether you want to do it or not, right? There were no such thing as boundaries back then, right? And at the time, I was like double, triple booking. So just imagine you have no boundaries. You're taking all these clients in. Half of them you don't even like. You just, you know what I mean? It's just like you're just doing the job that you have assigned yourself to do. And then 2020 hits and bam, you are faced with this reality that any second your life may no longer like exist. And how do you want to live it for the rest of it? And I was like, this is the time. If I am going to reevaluate who I am as an artist, first of all, I never thought of myself as an artist before the pandemic. So I had to say, now I am an artist. I'm not just a service provider. I am an artist. How do I want to restructure who I am as an artist? And if I'm going to do it, now's the time to do it. You know, I had all these clients, at least 3 months of clients, and I had to somehow try to find a way of accommodating when we opened up. And I was like, we open up. And so I had to think to myself, whatever I do moving forward with these clients that I'm rescheduling, it has to not only benefit them, but it has to serve me. Um, and much like you, like just everything changed. I also, 2020 was the year that I had a voice, and people, and it changed the trajectory of my career. Sometimes I think maybe for the worse, but for the better in my personally. And previous, previously, you when I was a hairstylist, there are certain things we learn, right? Like we learn to keep our conversations neutral. We don't talk about politics, and we don't talk about anything that is controversial, right? We just like nice small talk. Boy, it's
Mhm.
hot outside. How about that? And
Mhm.
I tell you, I
Mhm.
still have conversations because I live on a swamp in DC. But now I have more meaningful conversations because in 2020, not only in height of the pandemic, but everything that was going on with Black Lives Matters and the current presidency at the time, I had a lot of opinions. And I realized that I cannot leave this space of being enclosed and share my feelings online and then go back to my chair and just be this sort of like jester, like dancing around and playing this role. I wasn't going to do it anymore. And, it was really unfortunate. I'll tell a quick story. I had a client who sat in my chair, and she had been my client for a couple of years. She was very polite, but she was also extremely religious. She was a very Christian. And she would share a lot of her personal beliefs with me, and they were never anything offensive. And I grew up in a Christian household, so there wasn't anything that she said that I wasn't unfamiliar with. Um, and she was always very kind in the way that she said things. But, there was something about the pandemic that flipped a switch in some people that there was just no coming back from. And she sat in my chair. And I remember so vividly when she said to me, I just don't understand. Don't lives matter? She said that to me. And I looked at her like, do you read the room? Do you know your audience? And on about like the things with George Floyd, and she just said some things that not only did I find problematic, but extremely offensive as a Black woman. And even though I'm biracial, I navigate the world as a Black woman. So I found it deeply offensive. And it was like the weekend before the 4th of July. I said, I'm going to let her have her 4th of July. I'm going to let her have a good time. And then after the 4th of July, I said, I'm sorry. I know I can no longer see you as your hairstylist. You've been a great person. I believe that you are a woman of faith. I believe that you are a good person. But ideologically, we just do not fit. And I cannot be the hairstylist for you. And believe me, she tried to walk back the things that she said to stay in my chair, which I appreciated that she valued my artistry, the thing in my work that I did for her. But as a human being, I no longer knew that I could share the same space with her, and it just wasn't going to happen. And so, yeah, I mean, that I knew when I had left my home to start working with clients again, that this was going to be a new era for me, and I don't regret it whatsoever.
Hmm. And I had this actually, not that specifically. Thank you for sharing that. I know a lot of people are going to find value in that. And I do think 2020 was it was a moment, obviously, in the world, or it's still a moment to this day, if we're being honest. But specific to the beauty industry, a lot of things changed when we had, because we're so used to running, like run, like you said, we're double and triple booking and we're shoving our food down our face and we're holding it all day. We can't even go to the bathroom. And now we have 3 months or more. Like California was out of work for like 8 months. Um,
Oh,
to,
hard.
to just sit and think about our life decisions, right? And this industry will never be the same. But you touched on, and I definitely wanted to spend some time on this with you because it's something that I admire about you, and I'm just so proud of it, and so I wanted to talk about this. So, you spoke about George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, and how this is kind of a new way of being, like having these conversations behind the chair. I've only been following you for a couple of years, so I didn't see that part of, although you did post on Juneteenth, and I was just like, I just adore you.
Oh,
But you've made several posts, and I want to make sure I get this right. So let me go back to my notes. It was earlier this year. First of all, you connected with other local stylists to host a Pay What You Can pop up for Palestine event. But then you later made a post that really touched me, and I reached out to you just to let you know, and it still stands, that if you just ever need to blow off,
well,
steam or vent or whatever, you can always, I'll be there, and what's said in the chair stays in the chair. But you later posted that you may have ruined your career, lost industry respect, and brand deals. So, like I said, first off, I just have so much respect for you for having the courage to speak on what's not only a humanitarian crisis, but also a genocide, if we're being honest. And I was
absolutely, yeah.
curious, one, if you got any pushback, um, had anyone reached out to you? You don't have to name names because I understand that you are still trying to have a career here. Um,
Right.
but did you get any pushback on that? And would you do it again? And I know I already know the answer to the second one, but did you get any pushback on
Right.
that?
Um, so real quick, I want to preface that I have always been an actor.
Mhm.
So going back to me mentioning that, like my crust punk roots, like You know, I grew up in the punk rock hardcore scene, and the punk rock hardcore scene in itself is a very political social movement, right? It's a movement of resistance. And so growing up in that scene, and I never thought twice about being vocal about where I stood on certain humanitarian rights. Like I remember sneaking off to go to a free Leonard Peltier protest in Washington, D.C., despite my father telling me that I needed to watch what I was doing because he worked for the government, right? But I've always been very, very strong in convictions when it comes to human rights and speaking up for those in marginalized communities. But I never made that a part of my beauty persona. And it's because we go through the industry thinking you can't have these conversations. And when 2020 happened, and I chose to use that time to express my experience as a Black woman in the industry and in the world, I got a response from that. However, you know, people seem to think that the pandemic and everything that happened in 2020 was like history because things seem to have regressed, right? But the thing that doesn't change is your moral compass, at least not my moral compass. So I'm the kind of person that when I see wrong happening in the world or when I feel like I see an injustice, I am not scared to speak on it. And in the past, you know, it's been about, you know, speaking women's names, you know, calling out about all the injustices to the indigenous communities, you know, just a table of things, LGBTQ rights. Um, and for the most part, people seem to be in alliance with that. But there's something about this Palestinian conflict that makes people pause and not want to say the G word. And um, I think I think there are more people that are willing to speak up for it now because it's gone to the point where it's so in our face.
Undeniable. Yeah.
It's undeniable. It's undeniable at this point. The amount of deaths in the you cannot call it by any other word. So initially when I would post about it, and I was mostly posting in my stories, I would, you know, maybe get a couple of comments here and there from people who felt the same way. But then I started to notice little things, like little transgressions, like I had a client who was Jewish, who we always had a great relationship and saw things the same way. But then they called and they canceled their appointment with me, and then they said, "I'll call back to reschedule." And I'm sure it's about this, but they continued to follow me. But and they were watching my stories. So, but they had a problem with what I had to say enough to remove themselves from my terror. And you know, that's prerogative. I've always been supportive of the Jewish community as a whole. This has nothing to do with Jewish people at all. I still have Jewish friends, and many of them are pro ceasefire. So I was a little taken aback because I thought that could have been a good opportunity for a conversation.
Mhm.
So it was small things like that at first, but then it ended up becoming one of those things where I just kept seeing my followers drop, and I had these large platform pages that followed me. One of them even gave me an I was even nominated or as like top 100 hairstylists of the year. I'm not going to say that publication's name, but you could probably surmise what publication it was. They followed me. They reposted me. I was a top 100 hairdresser. Stop following me. So
Mm.
I could see who were the pages and people that were not following me, and stop following me for these reasons. And
Yeah.
and pages too, like influencers that stopped following me. And does it suck? Yes, but not as much as it sucks to, have bombs dropped on you, not knowing when you're going to die, being the last one left of your family lineage, being a child with amputated limbs. I mean, that's nothing. That's nothing in the grand scheme of things. And and these losses are perceived losses, right? Because they only exist on the internet. I haven't lost any personal friendships, but I also keep like company. I don't surround myself with people who I don't ideologically align with anyway. So, you know, but but to your point, I feel like as I get a lot of credit for my work being incredible, for being beautiful. Um, but then I also feel like there are a lot of people who play the game and they get all these brand deals and they get signed to do things. And I'm wondering if it's because I shut my mouth that I am not allowed the same um, opportunities as others. Now, granted, I've been given some amazing opportunities. Nevertheless, I work for Danger Jones. They are an incredible brand. David and Alexis Thurston are amazing people. They believe in me. They've never said anything about what I have to say. And I think in large part it's because they know that I'm just a person of integrity. And I don't say anything out of malice. I also am an extremely supportive person. So if you know me, I'm also, I'm happy to give you the crown. Like I love to be Miss Congeniality. I don't need to be the spotlight. I don't say anything or do anything for clout. I like to think that everything that I do is sincere and genuine. And I think they see that in me, and that's why we have a working relationship. And I have a relationship with Air, Jenny Strebe, and these are people who have gotten the opportunity to get to know me as a human being, and so they don't see what I do or say as problematic because they know what I say and do with good intention. But I believe that my being vocal about human rights and the suffering of others and speaking up for marginalized communities has probably held me back from people or brands working with me. Absolutely, because they probably don't want someone with an opinion. They want people they can mold into their brands. And I have my own brands. So I don't want to be molded into someone's brand. I want to be able to be my own entity and work alongside brands whose ethos I connect with. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Absolutely. 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 Thank you so much for sharing all of that.
Oh, well,
Have
thank
you
you
ever
for.
wanted to quit the beauty industry?
Oh, of course, of course, and reasons, and for multiple reasons. Like I'm 42. My back hurts. I've been doing this for a long time, so I think about that. But I genuinely love what I do from the creative aspect. So I haven't gotten there yet. And then sometimes, when I'm on the internet and I see the bullshit that like I'm observing, I hope you don't mind that I curse, but I'm seeing all the things that are going on in the industry, and we've seen it time and time again, and it happens especially with men being placed in positions of power and they're given all this authority and then they just shit on it, is what it is. And I'm like, I don't want to be a part of this anymore, like I don't want to feed into that system anymore. But I think the thing that keeps me going is knowing that I think I have a purpose to disrupt, and my purpose in the industry to um, is to be different and to show others that they can be different and be successful as well.
I love that. Okay, let's get to so good. So
Oh,
good. Okay. let's see what we're doing on time. All right, we're going to start winding it down, but I do have a few more questions.
All
If
right.
so, the original question was, if you could narrow it down to the top three most important things that need to change in the beauty industry to make it a safer place for all, what would they be? If you want to do three, you can. If you want to do one or two, but what can we? And I know there's so much that I always say this industry has given me everything. Like, I love
Mm-hmm.
it with all of my heart. And also, there's so much
Yeah.
that needs to change.
Right.
But if you could
So much.
narrow it down to, like, you have three wishes, what are the top three most important things that we need to focus on right now to push the industry forward
In
and
this
make it
industry,
safer for everyone?
um, I think one of the first and foremost that I think is problematic about this industry is that we place importance on social currency.
Mm,
Um, the more followers someone has, then we start to equate that with success and or skill. And I think we all know that there are people with hundreds and thousands of followers that lack both. So I think beauty brands, if they really want to build community of inclusivity and make people feel like they can be a part and have a slice of pie, they need to start at hairstylists as artists and creatives and skilled professionals as opposed to endorsers, right? Like we're just endorsing a product, and
yeah,
depending on like how many followers we have guarantees the quality of the endorsement, right?
yeah, mm,
Um, so it's kind of like that the idea of uh, like quality over quantity for that. Um, and I think another thing that needs to change, because I've had people who've reached out to me that say that they admire my ability to be vocal about the things I'm passionate about and that they wish they could, but a lot of people are afraid to lose their brand deals, brand relationships. So I think that thing that needs to change is brands should not penalize their influencers having a voice and from wanting to use their voice on their platforms if they believe that that voice could be utilized for positive change. I'm not talking about brands just being willy-nilly and letting people say whatever they want to say with no repercussions, right? Like even I, when I'm speaking out, have to be thoughtful about the words that I use so that I don't alienate people and or so that it's able to reach people and without making them feel anything negative without and I don't want any recourse from the relationships I do have with the brands that I have. So but with that being said, if a stylist felt very passionately about maybe like Palestine, right, for one, which I've had many people mention that they are afraid to share more information because they're afraid of the repercussions of it. Um, if they feel vocal about that, they should be able to share that as long as what they're saying isn't ostracizing and outwardly anti Semitic. Which, by the way, I don't think saying Palestine is anti Semitic. I think it's anti-Zionist for sure, and it's definitely anti-Israeli government, but it's not anti-Semitic.
yeah,
Um, I think that I think it says more about brands who don't allow the artists that they work with to have a voice of their own. I think it says more about them than it
mm,
does about the artists themselves.
yeah,
Um, and so I think those are the two. And then I also think third one, there's so many brands that said they were going to do X, Y, and Z for the Black community when all that Black Lives Matter stuff happened. And I am still waiting, still waiting. And I mean, yes, have they brought on more people of color and diversified? their maybe diversify their teams, the beauty professionals that they work with. But what about higher up? What about in corporate settings? And you can't just use the same token faces over and over and over again. I mean, we already have potentially a presidency that wants to deconstruct DEI, right? So we shouldn't be looked at as people who are basically filling a quota, right, for how many colored people you have on the roster. We should be at the table because of what we're capable of bringing to the table. But a lot of companies still haven't sent out their invitations, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So,
Yep. No, totally agree. I want to go back where you were speaking about brands allowing their educators or the people who work with them, their influencers, to be outspoken about their beliefs. And I agree. But I'm curious, what do you like? Where's the line as far as what people are allowed to say? Because, like, what you talk about with Palestine, I wholeheartedly agree with. Um, but what if they have a Jewish influencer or educator who disagrees and feels that what they feels just as passionately about what they're saying that is complete opposite of what you're saying? How do we determine, or how do brands determine what's okay to say, what's not okay to say?
well, so is it based on fact or is it based off of feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm sharing my things about Palestine, these are all things based off of fact. There are numbers to prove that this is an ongoing genocide, and the ICJ has just declared Israel, basically it has said that they are illegally settling in Palestinian territories, and now we, like the U.S., need to start sanctioning Israel for divesting our money from this. So when you have the ICJ announcing these things, what I'm saying isn't my personal opinion. It's fact what's going on. If you want in, you want to start spewing things about how saying free Palestine is anti-Semitic. Well, first of all, Semites are those who descended from the land of Canaan, and they are Palestinian as well. They're also Palestinian Jews, Palestinian Muslims, and Palestinian Christians. So wanting to say free Palestine isn't about trying to align with a Muslim terrorist group. It's saying that there is an entire culture of people who are being essentially trying to be wiped out um, for what I think are criminal reasons, and so is what you want to state fact or is it feeling?
And that's that on that. I love an activist who knows their stuff, because they're always like, oh, what's the guy that they always try and say is paying all of the activists to say, you know, I can't think of the guy's name. It'll come to me. So I love it when you know what you're talking about. And right, facts are not feelings. And that's a brilliant way to know who can say what, because you can't just come out and say, Donald Trump is the best president we ever had. Well, what are the facts? I got you. All right. Okay. So I said we're winding down. I have one more question, and then we're going to do a segment that I call Story Time with Auntie Here Coach.
Ooh,
So the question is, you're walking into a classroom as an educator. What
okay.
is most important to you as an educator when you're going in to teach a class?
I think one of the most important things as an educator when I'm teaching a class is I want people to feel comfortable with me, right? I don't want to be up here and have everyone feel like they're down here. I think I want people to think that and know that we're peers. It's just that I have something that I want to share with you right now. That's all it is. And I don't ever want to be unapproachable. I think that's probably I feel like that's the biggest disservice that educators have um, with their audience is when they come across unapproachable, like whether the audience doesn't feel like they can answer a question or doesn't feel comfortable enough to even just say, "Hey, I really liked your class, thank you." Like, you know,
Yes,
so that
absolutely. Okay, so now we've reached the part I call it story time with Auntie Hair Coach. I have 3 prompts. You can choose to do all 3. You can choose to do only one, whatever you want to
okay,
do. 3 prompts, and you just give us a quick little something about it.
okay.
Okay, so first prompt is favorite song lyric and why. The
Uh,
second prompt is the most interesting place your career has ever taken you. And the third prompt is the first time you ever messed up someone's hair.
no. Okay. All right. How about the first time I ever messed up someone's hair? How about
Okay.
that? Um, you know what? I can't. I'm so old. I can't even remember. Look, I could barely remember to call you back, to text you back. So I don't know
Word.
if uh, I can definitely. I definitely can talk about like the first time that I can remember messing up hair.
Okay.
Uh, so I remember time this girl came in. She wanted to do a vivid. I had at that time I had done Vivids, but they were more experimental. They in having models, so I had the control of like what I was doing. I had never actually. I had very few clients that came in and showed me a picture of what they wanted, and I'm pretty sure this girl probably showed me a picture of this pastel pink that like someone like Belle Pipsqueak did, right? Just like something very very cute, very pretty. And this is pre-pandemic, mind you, like maybe 2 years pre-pandemic. And Popeye had just come out. I had barely worked with it. I was trying to figure it out. And she said, I just want to be this pastel pink. And I got way too excited. And I think I put on every pink that they had on that girl's head. And she came out and she started crying in my chair because she's like, I feel
Oh.
like I'm wearing a wig. And it was nothing like that picture. And of course, I'm freaking out. I don't know what to do,
Yeah.
right? So then I go and I take her back to the shampoo bowl and I try to do a bleach wash. And then I'm giving her hot roots because I'm putting bleach in the areas where there were no bleach before. It was, I
Oh.
just, she, she left with it better than it was before, but it wasn't good. It wasn't
Yeah.
good.
Did she let you do
No,
her
it was
hair again after that?
no, I never saw her again. No, I didn't charge her. Never saw her again. Yeah, no, that was bad. Yeah, and I'm supposed to be now, so I don't
Yeah.
know, but I think about that.
Good stuff. How can my audience follow your movement?
All of my movements.
Mhm.
Well, I'm on Instagram, Main. I'm on TikTok too, but I'm really there to watch the videos, not to be on the videos. So you won't see much come up on my TikTok feed. And and yeah, and you know what? I always tell people I like people, so hit me up in my DMs and say hi. You know, don't curse me out or anything because I'll curse you out back. But you
Not
can
for
come and
real.
say hi, and I so.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing
Well,
time with me today,
oh
Asia. And that's totally what happened, you guys. I just hopped in her DMs and was like, I really want to talk to you. And now here we are. So, um,
yes.
yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
No, I appreciate you. I appreciate you. And you know what's so funny, real quick, before I was going to meet up with you, I was like, do I call her Auntie? Do I call her Tasha? Is it Auntie, Miss Tasha, if she's nasty? What?
Right? Hilarious. No, I'm
Yes.
just Tasha. And I call myself Auntie because I've been in the industry for 28 years. So we got all these babies coming in. And though I
Yeah.
have grandchildren, I'm not there. First of all, I'm not old enough to be their grandmother. So
Right.
I'm just like the big sister, the cool auntie.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of
I,
trying to get out of the way and let them do their thing and just be a guide along the way.
I love, I
Sit down, sit down. Oh, yeah. I'm so glad you could make it.
Next time on Therapy Sessions with Auntie Hair Coach.
So for me and what I teach and how I teach with cutting isn't a haircut. You're not going to be educated in the Azuri cut. So, my thing is more of a methodology and how, like you said, to change your thinking about how you see texture. Because a lot of what we've been doing when it comes to texture and curls is way too much. We do way too much, way too much.